I'm Floyd Wooderson. Welcome to another session of my personal memoir, Wolves of Hemp Street. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on those bell notifications to make sure that you don't miss new chapters being uploaded weekly. Thank you for having integrity and tuning in. Chapter 10. Mount Vesuvius. God, damn it, Hunter. Teddy could barely speak mere seconds after a large inhale spiraled him down into a Black Death cough attack. Way more than Teddy had expected or wanted. How much did you put in that thing? I don't know. Not too much, Hunter said with a guilty smile. Hunter was our weed warrior. Nearly everyone on the farm smoked weed, some more than others. Some only liked smoking flower, while others liked the concentrates, dabs, shatter, wax, etc. Hunter liked it all, proving he was no lightweight. The kid would constantly be rolling joints or blunts, even some with wax inside for an extra kick. He had his fancy nectar collector for dabs on the road, and of course he had a bong. Can't be a certified stoner without one. One had to be ridiculously wary of smoking what he had prepared, especially for a lightweight like me. Teddy learned that the hard way. We had been gearing up for another night shift when Hunter offered Teddy a small dab to get the night going. Teddy, who took him on his word, took a normal-sized hit off the nectar collector and was flabbergasted by unforeseen strength. The dab shot him into a giggle fit. My boss was now unable to function, immediately regretting his decision. Every time Teddy would try to give instructions, he would make eye contact with me and immediately start laughing. Fuck. He would say, pointing to Hunter, never smoking with you again. While Teddy was on a mission to Mars for 3 or 4 hours, Brad and Aaron stepped up to help. They had joined in on some of the past patrols already, usually with tequila beverages in their drink holders and country music blaring out their truck speakers. They were well off the clock, with their main job being managers of the field crew during the day. But they felt just as protective over the plants as we did, and the tequila was a stimulant that kept them going well into the night. There were some workers out there that I could tell just wanted a paycheck, and fruit from our trees, but I could easily spot the ones that took pride in the operation and had a passion for the future potential of what this booming industry held in store. Brad and Aaron were all in, even if they did wet their whistle from time to time. Who would have thought that trying to change your sleeping pattern every week would be difficult? I had been incredibly jet-lagged a couple months prior from my return from Australia, being out of it for at least a week. Jet lag had thrown my digestion all out of whack, and I found myself awake at the most random times during the night, unable to sleep, basically rendering me a zombie with stomach flu. Where that was all fresh in my mind and inexperience, constantly shifting sleep cycles for security was wreaking the same kind of havoc on us. With Trent liking his morning shift, and Hunter open for whatever was thrown his way, Teddy decided to keep our shifts the same as how we started. It was much easier on us. Midnight lunches became the norm, and the witching hour, 3 a.m. to 4 a.m., was my new friend. There is something about the quietness of night, especially knowing the danger. Hell, if there weren't humans trying to steal our hemp, then bears, mountain lions, and coyotes were often nearby. The sense of danger was somewhat intoxicating and almost military-like. I loved volunteering to stay in the far corner of the property, away from any civilization, alone with the fire pit and protecting the most vulnerable part of the land, besides the front gate. It was just so peaceful out there. The cool evening wind coupled with the sound of crickets and the occasional owl. I marveled at the twinkling stars and faint outline of the Milky Way galaxy. The lingering smell of limonene, pinene, and myrcene was everywhere. It was heaven. News of farmers and their incredibly seeded crop was making the rounds. In an area highly concentrated with hemp farms, seeding was to be expected. With the vast number of farmers growing the crop, it was inevitable that someone had shit seeds with a subpar feminization rate, pollinating some of their crop and those close by. However, when a plant thickened with rich and savory buds turns into nothing but seeds, it's a problem and a huge loss. When hearing these stories surface, I can't help but remember our little bee scenario and crack a little smile. Now I'm not blaming it on us, but pollen can travel far and wide, especially with an army of bees. A lot of farmers were pissed, pointing fingers, bitching about rumored sabotage, and threatening action. Farmers' etiquette was breached, but what exactly could one do? It was nature running its course, after all. But this was all the least of our concerns. There was something big boiling over internally. Behind the scenes, lava had started to seep out of the metaphorical volcano. Tension between Julian, Eli, Billy, and Ralph was at breaking point with Pompey. His constant absence but continued want of power had driven a wedge between him and the top investors. If Julian, Eli, Billy, and Ralph were putting in all of the work and making the wheels of the business turn, why should someone who's never there try and run the show? Multiple times, the executives would have heart-to-hearts with Pompey, telling him to stay in his own lane and just sit back, relax, and await the return on his investment at the end of the harvest. He wasn't having it. But a situation that wasn't even business related is really what took it to the point of no return. It was the lighting of a powder keg, very much like the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand to spark World War I. While a large group of people were at the Rocky Road house for a business meeting, including Kelly and his girlfriend, Tony, a sexual comment about Tony was muttered by Pompey. She didn't hear it, but Kelly did. He lost his shit. You don't piss off the boss of bosses, especially by talking about his girlfriend in an incredibly inappropriate way. Kelly didn't want to conduct any further business with him and didn't want him anywhere near his property. He wanted him gone. Mount Vesuvius finally erupted, creating a cascade of events that forced us to harvest early. We need to quickly backtrack. Now, I don't know all of the details after the Tony and Kelly incident because it got pretty complicated, but when we harvested, it was actually premature. Yes, the weather was changing, and our harvest window was already small, but we weren't exactly ready to start harvesting when we did. I don't know the exact process, guidelines, or deadlines, but I do know that you have to notify the Colorado Department of Agriculture, CDA, when you're going to harvest your crop. You would have to notify the department 15 days, now 30 days, prior to your harvest date. When that date is set, there may have been a little bit of a grace period for you to start, maybe 1 or 2 days on either side, but that starting date is pretty much set in stone. The problem was that Pompey, who didn't have his name on the legal documents for the actual crop, Kelly and Tony did, notified the CDA of a harvest date without consulting the rest of the crew. So when Pompey showed up with a B-team crew to start harvesting, all hell broke loose. We ended up putting the farm on lockdown, locking the front gates and halting all work. All of the workers were put inside the Rocky Road house as the police, CDA, attorneys, Kelly and Tony, and the rest of the executive crew fought out on the street in front of the property. I'm sure the whole situation was tough on Julian, as he had been friends with him for so long, but Julian was sick of it. He wanted to neutralize the cancer before it could spread. Due to all of this, we had to move our harvest dates up to quickly get plants off the field, protect our investment, and make sure that he didn't get anything. That's another reason why security got so important, even during the daytime. We were positive that Pompey had spotters driving by and scoping out the farm, trying to find any piece of dirt they could further use in court. A couple of times, security would halt his people from trying to come on the property unannounced, trying to pry information out of us. No one broke. Finally, Julian and the rest of the execs came up with a solution. They would settle on a portion of the field drying plants and allow him no more than 2 hours on the property to collect, staying far away from the rest of us. At one point Ralph could be heard yelling on the phone, "Okay. That's enough, tell him to get the fuck off our property now." It was a huge sigh of relief when he and his crew pulled off the farm for the final time and any legally pending action was dropped. Fast forward to the present, the harvest of our farm was wrapping up, plants were still hung up outside, but they couldn't stay out there long, otherwise there was the risk of financial loss. With nothing to protect the already dead and drying plants, any snow or rain would basically deplete any cannabinoids, rendering the plant worthless. We couldn't just put them in a super sack, large polypropylene bag, because the plants would just create moisture in the bag and mold. Plus, the lingering concern that Pompey never left. We didn't feel safe until all of the plants had completely disappeared from Rocky Road, either by another storage facility or by being fully processed. We needed to find a solution, and fast. Chapter 11. Bozeman Ranch. By then end of our harvest at Rocky Road, the RV life was starting to take its toll. It felt crowded, with 3 men full of testosterone. I couldn't thank Julian enough for letting Trent, Hunter, and I set up shop there, but it got old quickly. The propane for heat wasn't working, it was a cramped pigsty, and I just wanted a clean place to myself. Amidst all of the harvest drama, Julian, Eli, Billy, and Ralph had been hard at work finding another property. The Rocky Road house wasn't cutting it anymore for business meetings. We needed more space. A property had just come on the market and moving quickly with the help of some bigwig investors. It was bought before real estate competition could beat us to it. The property was a 100-acre horse ranch a couple miles outside of town. The owners, who had been boarding and offering riding lessons for 30 years, were finally retiring. The property was complete with the owner's 5-bedroom home, a smaller 3-bedroom manufactured home, a huge stable/barn, a large shed with a hay loft, a metal bunker, and about 60 plantable acres. Welcome to Bozeman Ranch, our saving grace and new home base. My first time going to Bozeman Ranch was the first day we had access to it, sometime during the first week of October. Snow flurries were starting to spit down, and a white haze left little visibility. This may have actually been the first snow of the season. When I arrived with Brad, we pulled straight up to the barn, packed with members of both F2, F and K and G unloading box trucks and hanging hemp. We hadn't fully closed on the property yet, but the owner and his wife were kind enough to give us access to the barn for our hemp, which really saved our ass. But they were adamant that we stayed on that side of the property, away from their house. They valued their privacy and wanted to enjoy the last of their time there as best they could. The smaller house, which was on our side of the property, was still occupied by the property manager and his son, but they would be moving out soon. That left the only livable space to us, a small, 300 square foot studio apartment in the barn. The apartment was momentarily given to Justin's friend Seth. I'm not exactly sure Seth wanted the job, but he was placed in charge of security for the plants in the barn. It was a huge responsibility and an honor to be asked to do that job. It showed that you were trusted. But from what I could tell, Seth's heart was with the growing process of cannabis, not the security measures. But the great perk of accepting this watchman role was an actual place to stay momentarily, rather than continuing to live out of his Saturn wagon. The barn itself was about half a football field in length and about a third of that in width. It had 10 horse stalls on each side and a riding area in the middle. At the rear was another huge sliding barn door, barely visible with the workers hanging wire and hemp at different heights. With the help of box trucks and scissor lifts, the crew was able to hang wire as high as 20 feet up. Utilizing all we could, the horse stalls were installed with multiple lines of trellis for extra hanging space. Even still, the barn was filling up quickly, and we still had most of sunflower to harvest. Once again, I couldn't believe how much space was needed for hemp. This large barn was barely cutting it. After helping out for a couple of hours, Brad and I left to head back to Rocky Road to catch up with Teddy and Julian. There we got into a deep discussion about the massive amount of hemp in the barn and only one person guarding it at night. Not nearly enough. There were too many new faces around, and inside jobs were always a concern. Without too much debate, I was given the job of aiding Seth with nighttime security. This helped put everyone more at ease. Whereas security at Rocky Road was definitely intimidating, BOZEMAN took it to a whole other level. Not only was the property further out of town, but since the caretakers weren't staying on the property anymore, although they weren't fully moved out of the small house yet, there was no one else besides me, Seth, and the current owners, who couldn't be bothered about our little hemp operation. So when Teddy dropped me off just shy of 9 p.m. on my first BOZEMAN shift and closed and locked the gate behind him, it was just me, the wind, and the coyotes again in an unfamiliar land. My heart was beating out of my throat the first time I cleared the barn. I wasn't necessarily afraid of someone being there the very first night, but the barn was big and there were plenty of blind corners. Getting the lay of the land was important, especially in the dark of night. With my breath heavy, I slowly maneuvered my way from front to back and back again, employing my best CQB, close quarters combat, tactics. Every shadow was a threat, some human-like while others showcasing the horns of Lucifer. Not today, Satan, I said to myself, not today. I would do these clearing sessions every hour, making sure that doors were locked and stall doors on the outside were closed. I would then proceed with a perimeter walk outside. That first night I was armed with my Glock, a 12-gauge, and Teddy's tactical vest. After my rounds, I would either go back into the apartment and post up by the window or go to the barn's exterior bathroom, just outside the barn doors. If I were to go into the apartment I would most likely have to endure a talk with Seth about too many chiefs out there trying to boss each other around. In order to stay away from the internal drama and gossip, most times I would find myself in the outside bathroom, cracking the door open to an unmolested view of the gate to the barn. After 9 p.m., no one would be showing up unannounced unless it was the owners out late, in which they would enter through the gate on their side of the property. Anything after midnight, and most likely we have a problem. The good thing about the property was it had plenty of vantage points to see if cars were coming down the dirt road and if they turned onto our long and curvy driveway. That gave us ample time to prepare for something, whether calling the cops or Teddy. The first week went relatively smoothly. The day would usually pan out like this: I would be picked up in the morning by either Brad or Teddy, then taken back to Rocky Road. I would then sleep during the day and get dropped off once again in the evening. I would arrive every night to see the barn that much more full, to the point that all of the stalls were stuffed, the room on the wires was scarce, and there were now piles of hemp on tarps on the ground. Workers were even having fun and making tunnels through the 10-foot-tall hemp mounds. Too much product, too little time. When asking how much more was still out in the field at Sunflower, all I would get was a sarcastic laugh. There was no end in sight. I felt guilty not being out there, but I was needed where I was. The night had finally arrived. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap that bell notification to be reminded when new chapters are posted each week. And until next time, don't forget to have integrity.